Hello from REACH Law and welcome to our webinar, which is today not centered on REACH, but is going beyond REACH. The title is Chemicals Management as a Multi-Regulation Challenge for Companies Operating on the EU Market. So we will have a non-REACH focus today, looking at some other recent developments and providing also an outlook for some EU laws addressing chemical safety and sustainability. My name is Tim Becker. I'm a German qualified lawyer by training and have been working as a senior legal advisor here at REACH Law. And my work has been mainly on the EU REACH regulation over the years, but increasingly now also on related EU and also non-EU laws governing chemicals and environmental sustainability. I have over 15 years of experience in the field, and I have done extensive work to help industries, but also governmental agencies to address regulatory impacts, especially on complex products which rely on the use of hazardous substances. So, and with this, I'll introduce you the agenda for today. Before I will turn off my camera, also to help you focus on the contents. So I will start, of course, with some words about REACH Law, what we do, and also where you can find us. Then I will do the first section on a mapping of chemicals-related requirements. So I will give you an overview of both existing but also new requirements and those in scope of today's webinar. Part 3 will be dedicated to the CLP revision from 2024, and I want to focus here on the changes to the classification rules, especially the harmonized classification. Then part 4, I will elaborate on the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products regulation, and now as a topical addition, also reflect on the first working plan published by the European Commission last week under ESPR. And we want to look in particular here also how chemicals as products are planned to be addressed under ESPR. Then in section 5, I will discuss substances of concern and what is the state of play concerning their regulation under various EU sustainability laws. And here we will look in particular at the situation under ESPR, as I just mentioned, then the batteries regulation and the new packaging and packaging waste regulation. And in the last chapter of my presentation, I will address briefly the general product safety regulation, which has been effective since the end of last year, and which could mean some possible additional requirements for manufacturers and other economic operators dealing with consumer products. And last but not least, I'll conclude and give some further insights to possible REACH law assistance. And at the end of the webinar, we may have some time for questions and answers. Okay, about REACH law. So we are not a law firm, even though I'm a lawyer, but we are a multidisciplinary service provider to help companies comply with chemicals regulatory requirements, and also we do related advocacy work. Our focus is on EU REACH, but also REACH-like regulations in different countries in Europe and in Asia. Our core services include registration, acting as a REACH-only representative, and authoring of safety data sheets. But then specifically in the European Union, we also look more broadly at other laws and policies addressing chemicals, which complement the REACH regulation. And this activity, of course, is very much the focus of today's webinar. The needs of our clients, be it companies, industry associations, or governmental organizations, are manifold. We try to meet those needs flexibly with our tailored consulting services, which come in addition to our core services. So whether you need help to prepare position papers and consultation input to ECHA and the European Commission, you need to train or update your staff and members on REACH and related requirements, or you are in need of legal assessments on the applicability of certain legal obligations or exemptions, REACH law experts can be of help. Feel free to reach out. Now here you find an overview of our upcoming events in the near future. So in-person events where you can meet our colleagues. Next week, for example, we are exhibiting at Chem Expo India in Mumbai. Later in May, we will be at the Chem UK 2025 in Birmingham, exhibiting and presenting. In the beginning of June, we are at ChemSpec Europe in Cologne exhibiting. And then in the middle of June, on the 17th of June, we'll be in the Netherlands in Noordwijk to present and moderate at the 6th European Space Agency REACH workshop, as we have been a contractor to the Space Agency on REACH and chemicals legislation since 2012. And also an information about an upcoming webinar on EU REACH. So today we go beyond REACH, but this is EU REACH and in particular the REACH Revision 2025. A webinar is coming up, conducted by a colleague of mine on the 6th of May, which you should have received this information if you are on our distribution list. If not, please contact us at webinars@reachlaw.fi if you want to follow this event. Okay, and then we have a YouTube channel which is called REACH Law Talks, and all our webinars and podcasts are published here. So feel free to, if not already done, to follow this YouTube channel. So by now we have already published over 100 videos on a very broad range of topics covering our scope of work. Now I still want you to please take note of this disclaimer and copyright notice. So the content of this presentation is for general information purposes only. And before acting on any information presented here, you should consider the appropriateness of the information for your specific case. And if you have any questions or doubts regarding the further use of this presentation, please get in touch with us. And with this, I can start to discuss the contents of today's webinar, starting with the mapping of requirements. So as a background, I think it's good to recall that even according to estimates by the European Commission, we have around or more than 100 EU laws which are dealing with chemicals in the European Union. This magnitude has further increased now in the course of the 2019 European Green Deal and the corresponding sustainability movement. So many of you are familiar with chemicals strategy for sustainability, Circular Economy Action Plan, Sustainable Products Initiative, and so on. So these all have driven quite a few changes to existing legislation and also new laws. Also, ECHA has received a number of new tasks on top of REACH, CLP, and biocidal products regulation, which it now addresses under the basket of EU environmental policy. And further tasks are expected to come in the near future under the One Substance, One Assessment package, which is currently with the co-legislators in the EU. So we can really see that still the trend continues that that regulations which directly apply without the need for national transposition increasingly replace directives as a regulatory or legal instrument. Also, we can see that the product-specific regulations are gaining ground again in the EU. I will come back to that, especially when we discuss substances of concern. And of course, overall, the situation is very complex, resulting in blind spots and also some unclear interfaces between the laws. Yeah, the work started under the European Green Deal is now continuing under the new Commission. Priorities have shifted a little bit. Now we have new policies issued, like the Competitiveness Compass and the Clean Industrial Deal, and some further roadmaps and plans are to be published in the near future. We expect the chemicals industry package at the end of this year, and then a new Circular Economy Act at 2026. And these are only a few examples. So the environment remains very volatile, and yeah, there's a need for constant monitoring. So here's some snapshots of the feedback that we have received from you when you registered for this webinar. And you have also confirmed, of course, that assessing the impact of and monitoring a multi-regulation scope on top of REACH and CLP is very challenging because the requirements are complex. A lot of resources are required, and there are many uncertainties regarding the implementation. For example, when we talk about substances of concern in different EU product and sustainability laws. There are many moving parts to be followed and potentially addressed. And of course, it depends very much on the company's specific product portfolio, what applies and what needs to be followed more closely than others. So at the ECHA level, to address this multi-regulation scope, ECHA aims to help companies with UCLEF, which is an acronym for the EU Chemical Legislation Finder. This UCLEF website includes more than 50 European legislations as of recent, and as you see also on this slide, the information is quickly evolving. Last updates have been made in January this year, and before that in November 2024. You can also see here how ECHA is grouping the different pieces of legislation depending on the subject matter, with different blocks for environmental legislation, chemicals and product control legislation, worker protection, food safety, food contact material legislation, etc. So that's ECHA's attempt to map the chemical regulation universe. Here at REACH Law, we have also tried to map key EU laws addressing chemicals management. We have rather sorted them according to their sectorial scope into laws applicable horizontally to all sectors, versus laws that are applicable more like vertically to specific sectors. So on the top of the figure, you can see regarding horizontal legislation, that we have on the one hand pieces of legislation which cover a very broad product scope, such as, of course, REACH, CLP, but also the General Product Safety Regulation, GPSR, and those new sustainability frameworks such as CSRD, ESPR, or the EU taxonomy legislation. On the other hand, for the horizontal laws, we have laws which address specific substances. So here we have, for example, the persistent organic pollutants regulation or the F-gas regulation, just to name a few. And then if we go further down in this figure, we see on vertically applicable legislation, we have on the one hand quite a large basket of product-specific laws. So these may or may not apply to your product portfolio, depending on what you are doing. And then on the right-hand side, you see there is a number of laws which address a specific activity or are life cycle specific. And what we can see here is that these laws are typically directives. So this means that they require national transposition in the member states to take account of some local specificities and give some room for the member states to include their own protection level. And also you find here, I have highlighted with an asterisk those laws in the asterisk in green, those pieces of legislation which are now part of ECHA's environmental policy basket. So of course I should note that this overview is not exhaustive. So neither this overview is exhaustive nor is ECHA's UCLEF database exhaustive, but of course both and others can be used and help you find the right laws to determine and follow applicable obligations and what to do to comply. So this much about the mapping of requirements, and I'm now moving to discussing some regulation-specific developments, starting with the CLP Revision 2024. So here you can find at a glance an overview of the changes introduced by the CLP Revision 2024. The CLP Revision entered into force on the 10th of December last year. But it is subject to a number of transitional provisions for new provisions to be phased in until January 2027. So as you see from this overview, CLP Revision presents a patchwork of changes to update the framework, including on classification, labeling, including also digital labeling, provisions to change the CN classification and labeling inventory are made, and also miscellaneous other provisions. Now I want to place some emphasis on the changes to classification. So here we have the incorporation of the new CLP hazard classes, which were introduced in 2023, which I will come back to again in a bit. These new hazard classes are a central element of the CLP revision, and they will be prioritized for inclusion in CLP Annex 6, the list of harmonized classification and labeling. Furthermore, on harmonized classification and labeling, the CLP revision gives the Commission a right to develop classification proposals on hazardous substances, also besides member states and industry, which have already been able to make those proposals before. And in addition, Harmonized classification and labeling shall also be possible now for broader groups of substances. So not only for individual substances. So all these changes, together also with the simplified inclusion of the new hazard classes from other lists, such as the candidate list, are expected to boost the role of harmonized classification and CLP Annex 6. In relation to the classification and labeling inventory, ECHA will launch a new version next month, so in May. And after that, the development of the classification and labeling inventory will further continue. And later during 2026, the inventory will also incorporate the changes arising from the CLP revision, such as the publication of notifier names, which is foreseen in the CLP revision, and reasons for diverging classifications, which need to be given now. Okay, then talking about the new hazard classes from 2023, I guess they are already known to many of you. Those new hazard classes have been in force since 20th of April 2023. But now they are subject to staggered application dates between 2025 and 2028 for regarding the mandatory application by industry. And this is nicely illustrated here on this figure taken from ECHA. So we have now coming up on the 1st of May, the first application date for substances placed on the market as of 1st of May 2025, which also includes new quantities of substances already on the market before 1st of May 2025, when this new quantity is placed on the market as of 1st of May 2025. So when we have more time only for substances that were placed on the market before the 1st of May 2025 and which are already in the supply chain, and those substances do not need to be reclassified or relabeled before the 1st of November 2026. So there is some confusion around these application dates. So if you're unsure and if you have not yet made the reclassification and labeling, you're advised to reach out to your help desk or ask for legal advice in order to determine which compliance date applies to your case. As many of you will know, the ECHA has published a guidance to help industry work under these new hazard classes. And the major hurdle is understood to be the classification for endocrine disrupting properties. What I would also like to note that for those new hazard classes, there are not yet corresponding CLP pictograms. And those pictograms will only be added once these classes have been added to the UN globally harmonized system, which is not the case as of today. Okay, looking at the bigger picture, I already mentioned that the CLP revision 2024 is expected to boost the role of harmonized classification and CLP Annex 6 as a cornerstone to advance to boost the hazard-based regulation of substances. And the CLP classification and in particular the harmonized classification in Annex 6, which is legally binding, has a number of so-called downstream effects in numerous other laws in the EU, and not limited to REACH and CLP itself. Sometimes an inclusion in Annex 6 to CLP is a prerequisite to trigger those legal effects in such downstream legislation, but this is not always the case. So sometimes a self-classification may also trigger those effects. But as an example, those new sustainability laws with provisions on substances of concern, they make explicit reference to CLP Annex 6. So for example, ESPR and European Sustainability Reporting Standards refer to Annex 6 of CLP or certain hazard classes under it. Now, with regards to the revision of the REACH regulation, it remains to be seen whether and how the links to CLP Annex 6 will be strengthened. For example, for the purpose of identifying substances of very high concern or the introduction of new restrictions. And we also need to follow how the European Commission will make use of its new mandate to initiate harmonized classification and labeling for substances, including the groups of substances. Next, I want to take a brief look at the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products Regulation, ESPR, which entered into force on the 18th of July 2024. And here, in particular, I want to place a focus on the first ESPR working plan published last week. And finally, I also want to show how chemicals are addressed under it. So it's important to keep in mind that the ESPR is a framework regulation. So this means that legally binding requirements for economic operators have to be developed on a per product basis through Commission delegated acts. And the identification and prioritization of products for such acts is done through multi-annual working plans. Those products which have been prioritized are subject to dedicated preparatory studies and impact assessments, including stakeholder consultation, including also as part of the new Eco-Design Forum. The result of this process is the drafting and adoption of delegated acts containing eco-design measures, which may include information and/or performance requirements. And once adopted, the measure applies after a minimum of 18 months. So last week, on the 16th of April, the European Commission has adopted the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products and Energy Labeling Working Plan 2025 to 2030. And as you can see from this overview, out of the 11 product groups which were already shortlisted in Article 18 of the ESPR, the Commission has selected only a subset for the first ESPR working plan. So it has selected to work first on 4 final product groups, which are textile apparel, furniture, mattresses, and tires. Then on intermediate products, it's iron and steel, as well as aluminium were shortlisted. And here we understand that the Commission only wants to develop information requirements for those in the first step. Then we have the different categories of energy-related products, such as displays, mobile phones, tablets, and many more. And here the Commission wants to continue the work under the previous Eco-Design Directive. And then finally on so-called ICT products, information and communication technology products and other electronics. And these have not been included as such in the first ESPR working plan, but they are considered as covered on the one hand through some energy-related products just mentioned, and secondly, the Commission is planning to elaborate so-called horizontal measures, which will target certain aspects to enhance circular economy, such as repairability, for example, for consumer electronics and household appliances, and second, recycled content and recyclability of electrical and electronic equipment. So we have to see how this plays out, but you see that to some extent also these very complex products are planned to be addressed in the years to come. You should also keep in mind that a midterm review of this first ESPR working plan is scheduled in 2028. So then the Commission will take stock and see maybe to include additional products or maybe deselect certain activities. Okay, and now for the product groups not included in the first ESPR working plan, the Commission had to provide a reasoning for not including them in the working plan. For the case of foodware, detergents, paints, and lubricants, the main reason provided was the lower environmental impacts and improvement potential than for the selected products. And then for chemicals, for the group of chemicals, the reasoning is a bit more complex, because the chemicals indeed were very highly ranked in terms of their high impacts and also high improvement potential in terms of environmental sustainability. But the Commission sees that the chemicals are a very complex and wide scope product group. And because of this complexity, they have decided not to include them in the working plan yet, but they now instead plan to launch a study by the end of 2025 to define more precisely the potential chemicals in scope, as well as the potential focus areas for product aspect improvements as part of the future ESPR delegated acts on chemicals. So we shall see how this study will play out and what will be the outcome, which will maybe taken aboard already for the midterm review in 2028 or then otherwise in a following working plan. Finally, on ESPR in general, I would like to recall that the regulation dedicates a lot of attention to the interface with existing sectorial legislation and policies, including with EU chemical safety requirements such as REACH and CLP. I don't want to go too much into the detail of this figure, but I would just like to point out that with regard to performance requirements, which you see at the bottom of this figure, the ESPR legal text sets out that these performance requirements should not restrict chemical substances primarily based on chemical safety, simply because such restrictions are already subject to existing laws such as REACH or the POPs regulations. However, of course, improved human health impacts could well be a secondary or indirect benefits of measures targeting other environmental impacts. So this much about ESPR or ESPR in general. And now I want to provide you an update on the state of play under various EU sustainability laws for the so-called substances of concern. So the notion of substances of concern was introduced under the European Green Deal in both the 2020 Circular Economy Action Plan and the 2020 Chemicals Strategy for Sustainability, the CSS. And the CSS contained a first definition already describing SOCs as substances having a chronic effect for human health or the environment. And here there was a reference to the REACH candidate list and Annex 6 to the CLP regulation, but also including substances which hamper recycling for safe and high quality secondary raw materials. So what we see in the SOC definition is an extension of scope of substances beyond REACH candidate list SVHCs, and also beyond merely hazard-based concerns. So the aim is to encompass basically any substance that can be or that is proven to be detrimental to the circular economy. The CSS had set out dedicated actions to introduce legal requirements on the presence of substances of concern in products, including also PFAS, through the Sustainable Products Initiative. And this action, which I just mentioned, was at least partially realized through the introduction of the ESPR regulation, where substances of concern are now defined in Article 2, paragraph 27. And in addition to the three categories, which I already mentioned on the previous slide, a fourth category of substances regulated under the persistent organic pollutants regulation has also been added on the initiative of the European Parliament in the co-legislative process for ESPR. So we have four subcategories of SOCs under ESPR. Now it is important to recall that there are no direct requirements associated under ESPR with the fulfillment of the SOC definition. So SOCs really first need to be identified or also shortlisted for specific products in order to trigger legal requirements. And also it's important to understand that selected substances of concern in ESPR will be primarily linked to information requirements. So that means that they will have to be reported as part of the new digital product passports to be introduced. So this concept of SOCs in ESPR is not strictly related to restrictions. We will see that this is different under other laws. And last but not least, on ESPR, if you want to see how the identification of SOCs for ESPR delegated acts is progressing, you may want to take a look at the Commission's ongoing preparatory study for textile apparel. And because this work looks, of course, among others, also at substances of concern in apparel. And even if you're not affected by this product group directly, it is still interesting because this shortlisting activity may also set precedents for other products, in our opinion. Okay, so and then this figure aims to give you an idea of the very wide scope of the SOC definition according to ESPR, but at the same time also highlight the limitations. Unfortunately, there is no central list covering all SOCs that may fall under the definition. So in the end, this will be something that is product specific. The main scope increase that we have for SOCs as compared to REACH SVHCs is indeed caused by the substances with a certain harmonized classification in CLP Annex 6. According to the Commission, these are approximately 5,000 substances which are in the principal scope of this. On the other hand, the SOC definition does not necessarily cover all the substances targeted by chemical regulations, such as PFAS, because they are not all included in those reference lists. However, the Commission has one wild card, which is the category of substances negatively affecting the reuse and recycling of materials in the product in which it is present. And such substances are to be identified on a per product basis. And in relation to this last category, substances negatively affecting reuse and recycling, it's also worth noting that the Commission has already shared a number of possible subgroups of such SOCs as part of the already mentioned preparatory study on textile products. So you find it displayed here, these subgroups. I don't want to go into the detail now, but you see that there's already some thinking ongoing on how to define those substances negatively affecting reuse and recycling without necessarily being hazardous, according to CLP. And yeah, so also for this reason, it may be useful for you to follow also this study on textile products. Now moving on away from ESPR to other product laws using the SOC concept. We're starting with the batteries regulation of 2023. You know, the batteries regulation follows a life cycle approach to make batteries more sustainable and safe. And under Article 6, Paragraph 5 of this regulation, ECHA is currently preparing a report on substances of concern, which are present in batteries or are used in their manufacture. The industry is supporting this work by ECHA via a group which is called ECHA-BAM. And the third ECHA-BAM workshop, including industry and ECHA, just took place earlier in April. ECHA should be ready by the end of 2026 with its report, in order then for the European Commission to submit its report by the end of 2027. And here we can see that unlike in the case of ESPR, the identification of SOCs is done with view to possible restrictions for those substances in batteries. And those restrictions would then follow a similar process as under REACH in principle. In terms of magnitude, we understand that we are talking about a few hundred substances, first of all, which have been mapped in batteries by now. And the next step is now for ECHA to refine this list of a few hundreds further, identify which one of these would qualify as substances of concern and should be prioritized for possible restrictions. So there's still a lot of work ongoing and required, and today there's no real visibility which substances in batteries may eventually be prioritized for additional restrictions. Then moving on to the next legislation, a similar approach as under the batteries regulation is now also followed under the new packaging and packaging waste regulation, which has been enforced since 11th of February of this year. And the European Commission has already mandated ECHA to prepare a report on substances of concern and to be ready by September 2026, so very ambitious time frame. And this report should be on substances of concern in packaging and packaging components for possible follow-up via restrictions. Unlike the batteries regulation, the PPWR contains a clear separation between SOCs impacting chemical safety, which can be restricted under REACH, if related primarily to safety, while SOCs that negatively affect the reuse and recycling of materials and packaging can be restricted as part of design for recycling criteria under the PPWR. So depending on the concern, you have a different restriction path. Also under the PPWR, there is a minimization obligation set out for manufacturers with regards to SOCs and packaging. And this is a very far-reaching minimization obligation, as it includes also the possible presence of SOCs in emissions and any outcomes of waste management. So you see, you have to go very much into the detail of the regulations. For further information on this topic, you may check out an article that I've written on this multi-regulation topic in 2024 in Stoffrecht, the European Journal for Substances and the Law. And with this, and before concluding my presentation, I still want to take a brief look at the General Product Safety Regulation, GPSR. So the GPSR is a regulation of 2023, and it has been replacing already since the 13th of December of last year the previous General Product Safety Directive. The GPSR requires that all consumer products on the EU market are safe, and it establishes specific obligations for businesses of all sizes, so not limited to large companies, to ensure product safety. Now, we can consider the GPSR as a safety net for all products or risks which are not regulated in other EU legislation. And GPSR applies to all kinds of potential health hazards. Now, what is not so straightforward is how to determine additional requirements under GPSR. So in order to determine whether GPSR applies to your products and which provisions apply, it is advised to do a stepwise assessment as suggested in this flowchart that we developed. So first of all, you may have products which are excluded from the GPSR scope, such as medicinal products, food and feed. So if you benefit from such a scope exclusion, GPSR does not apply. Otherwise, you have to go further and see, secondly, are your products intended for consumers, or are they likely under reasonably foreseeable conditions to be used by consumers, even if not intended for them? And a definition of consumers here is also given in the GPSR, also reflected on this slide. So if you have determined that you have consumer products in this, according to this definition, you third have to assess whether your product, and this is the most complex question probably, if your product is subject to specific requirements imposed by EU harmonization legislation as listed in Annex 1 of the EU Market Surveillance Regulation. If this is the case, and there's also already existing safety legislation, then GPSR applies only partially to cover additional aspects and risks which are not addressed by those specific requirements. And the REACH regulation is also one of the laws which is listed in the Annex 1 of the Market Surveillance Regulation. So that could lead here to at least a partial application of GPSR to chemical products. Now, only if you determine that your product is not subject to any specific requirements imposed by EU harmonization legislation, the GPSR requirements apply in full. So to conclude, if you have a consumer product, it is advised to determine in a specific case which additional requirements of GPSR apply to it. Some key requirements, at least for non-harmonized products, include the conduct of a risk assessment, the preparation of technical documentation, and provision of traceability information. Now, according to the latest European Commission statistics from the EU's Rapid Safety Gate Alert System for dangerous non-food products under GPSR, the chemical products are not amongst the most common product categories notified as dangerous products. So just 6% of all the dangerous products notified through this system are chemical products. However, in almost half of the cases of those notifications, chemical ingredients are the main cause of the risk. So here, 49% of the chemicals, in 49% of the cases, chemicals are the most common risk notified. So this indeed highlights the importance of assessing chemical safety as part of risk assessments, including under GPSR. And finally, some conclusions and information on REACH law assistance. So I think the presentation has shown that chemicals management needs to take into account an increasing stock of requirements and activities on top of REACH and CLP. Compliance is needed where legally binding requirements are in place, but compliance is not enough, especially when it comes to the phased definition of requirements for substances of concern and also other aspects under laws such as ESPR, the batteries regulation, or PPWR. So in these cases, the industry also needs to be proactive in the rule-setting process in order to ensure fit-for-purpose regulation. For companies, there is a crucial need to identify all the relevant laws and developments, track them, and participate in consultations to inform regulators where appropriate. When developing and updating your compliance and wider chemicals management strategy, it is also important to understand the interlinks between laws and their implementation and the precedent-setting character of some developments for products that may not be part of your portfolio. So I have shown to you the example of the ongoing work for SOCs and textile products under ESPR. Last but not least, given the magnitude of the various developments, of course, the use of artificial intelligence tools to help your tracking needs to be explored. It will not solve all your problems in the foreseeable future, but can surely help to complete the picture and ensure timely information about changes. But you may also want to keep in mind that open access AI is prohibited in many organizations for confidentiality reasons. Now, how REACH law can help you further to tackle this multi-regulation challenge. We can provide product-specific support for your company or industry association. And as you can see from the slide, our services include support such as tailored monitoring and implementation of policy files. So here we address files. We can address files in the EU, UK, and also other jurisdictions upon a request. We help with stakeholder engagement and management tasks on chemicals policy. We can conduct impact assessments for specific regulations if needed. And also we run training and awareness sessions, such as for industry associations, their members and upstream suppliers. And as needed, we can provide consultancy services, be it regulatory, technical, or legal, for example, in order if you need to figure out whether you have obligations under certain pieces of legislation. So with this, we have reached the end of the presentation. I think the hour is almost up. Thank you for your attention so far. I may still have a look at the questions that we have received to see whether I can answer something ad hoc. Otherwise, I may come back to you after the webinar. Let me check the questions I received. So there's one question regarding CLP regulation and small packaging and exemptions. So that seems to refer to labeling. So I cannot answer this now at ad hoc, unfortunately. Then, of course, interesting question always: what is the formal definition of date of placed on the market? So yeah, I mean, definitions of placing on the market may differ depending on the legislation. So, for example, in REACH, it also includes import. So I think you should start. You should start with the legal definition, which is applicable to the legislation in question, and then go from there to determine what would be the applicable date for your activity for placing on the market. Then we have a question on substances of concern. Will the definition on SOCs be the same in CSRD, meaning only with harmonized classification on the listed hazard categories, or as well, do substances need to be calculated if they are self-classified only? Is a concentration limit applicable? So, I mean, for CSRD, we know that the definition under CSRD for SOCs is essentially the same as under ESPR, with the exception of POPs, so substances subject to the POPs regulation. And as for the harmonized classifications, or as for the CLP classifications, we only talk about harmonized classifications indeed, and those listed in the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, and so this excludes self-classified substances. Another interesting question: is the definition for consumer use under REACH different from the definition for consumer use in the GPSR? So yes, so here we indeed would have to look a bit more into the definitions under REACH. You may recall there is no legal definition of consumer, whereas under GPSR we have a consumer definition. So there may be differences, but the case would have to be analyzed more carefully. Then question: if a product is only sold for industrial and professional use under REACH, would it be exempt from GPSR? So I think I have tried to elaborate on this notion of consumer products. So you have to define carefully whether indeed there is no occurrence of products which, even if not intended for consumers, are reaching the consumers eventually. So if there is no consumer use of the product foreseeable for the product, then I'd say that the GPSR doesn't apply to your activities. But you should check it carefully based on the GPSR definition and also document your conclusions. So I think this is as far as I can go at this point. I think it may still be useful given the different questions and also those we have received prior to the webinar to still prepare a little Q&A document for the webinar participants. Let me work on this after the webinar. But for now, I want to thank for your attention, and hope this was useful for you. Remember that there will be a recording available for this webinar, and thank you, and have a nice rest of the day, and hope to be in touch again soon. Bye bye.